Taking the time to meet with us under these very unusual and very weird times. But here we are, and we're going to discuss intercultural communication. So as Irina said, for the honours students, this is an honours elective, and you get an extra ECTs. There are 4 assignments that we're going to undertake, and within the assignments we're going to use the theoretical framework of Professor Geert Hofstede. In the first assignment, it's a guided discovery where Walter, Dr. Smith, and I guide you to better understanding your own cultural dynamic using Hofstede. So instead of just looking at raw numbers like, oh, okay, I'm from New Zealand and I'm an 82 in masculinity, we sort of say, well, what does that mean? So instead we do a guided discovery on like, what are the behaviors in my moral circle, for example, in my immediate, the first 5 people that I socialize with, what's happening there in my behavior and theirs that would indicate that the masculinity is high, for example. And if you're Dutch, then that would translate into what's happening in your moral circle. So the first 5 people around you that you socialize and interact with the most, that would indicate that your behavior is feminine. And we don't talk about masculine and feminine in terms of gender, but in social behavior. So for example, high femininity, if you're Dutch, would translate into concession making, which is the polar model, and allowing space for opinions, right? But Irina and I, who are not Dutch, we come from cultures that have high masculinity. So then we're looking more at right or wrong, winning or losing, and limited conversation and getting to the point. So I'm also very open if I behave in a way that's very, very different from what you're used to, saying to me, gosh, that seems like a Hofstede masculine behavior, where maybe I'm not so willing to do the polar model. So as well as masculinity and femininity, we're looking at power distance. So again, if you're Dutch, there's going to be very small power distance. There's going to be very little hierarchy. And the guided discovery, again, explores where you might see this. Like if you've got extended family that are perhaps not Dutch, but you've got grandparents from another country, you might see a shift in your own behavior. And the reason we do this is that if you're going to, and because you're a bedrijfskunde student, we expect you will, be a successful business manager, perhaps a business owner or a C-level executive or a captain of your industry, you're going to be driving and leading teams, very probably, most likely, very multinational teams, and teams that are interdisciplinary, that are not necessarily in your speciality. And it requires a huge amount of social awareness on your part to navigate all of that nuance and recognize that sometimes things are not personal, it's just cultural. And once you understand the reference point of why someone might be behaving the way they are, it's much easier to make the concessions and all move forward, which creates a win-win, than trying to change it or get them to behave according to your standard, which is not going to happen and it's unrealistic. So the goal of this course is to make you, in short, an effective manager that can navigate cross-cultural teams. So we start with assignment 1, and that's a personal essay that explores your personal story. The second one is a peer review where you choose somebody from a different nationality. So the international students will probably pair up with a Dutch student. And again, we do the comparative analysis. We look at the similarities and we look at the differences and then how that might manifest in a team situation. So you've got Irina and I on the team, and we're Polish in New Zealand, high in the masculinity, high in the power distance. So what could you predict how we might expect things to be? And if there's a dominant Dutch culture, where might the problems occur? So before you even meet anybody, just by their nationality, you can also start doing some guessing on what is needed in the team to be functional and successful. The third assignment, and tonight we're actually having an exciting Zoom meeting, is we go to the International Criminal Court. And we do that because the International Criminal Court epitomizes the need for cultural sensitivity, because it deals with crimes against humanity, as well as it has a 92% employee population that's not Dutch. So imagine how they have to, as an HR function, look at how to best meet their employees' needs, and so that people feel listened to, people feel like they can be successful in their job. And how do they deal with small complaints? How do they deal with big complaints? And how do they set those boundaries, and how to facilitate the rules and the regulations, as well as do their job, which is participate in trials against humanity, and put people who are being investigated on trial, and who testify as well as witnesses. So it's an interesting visit. It also validates some of the language that we use in this course. So 2 words that stand out that we use in all 4 of the assignments is inhibitive and prohibitive. You don't need to know that right now, but inhibitive, an example is, it's personal and you feel it in the belly, you feel uncomfortable. So for me, it would be inhibitive to swear around my parents. It doesn't mean that I can't, but if I did, even though I'm almost 50 years old, everyone would feel uncomfortable and it would be considered a social taboo. Prohibitive is what we're looking at also, is that, again, it's not a social law, it's not a law in of itself, so it would be prohibitive to drive through a red light, but we're not looking at the law, we're looking at social behaviour. So it would be also prohibitive in my parents' home for me to smoke. So if I lit up a cigarette, I'd probably get smacked to the moon and back. So it's inhibitive to swear. I could do it, but it would be highly uncomfortable for everybody in the room, and it would be absolutely prohibitive because I would be told, you're not allowed to smoke. So we're exploring what would be in your cultural moral circle inhibitive for you. And the reason we do that is it's really, really difficult to walk in someone else's shoes and even begin to understand what could possibly be inhibitive. So if you're from a Dutch culture, for example, it could be very easy for you to feel like, because we're in a country that validates and promotes the Polder model, that this is my opinion and I'm going to share it. But in a country like New Zealand that has high hierarchy and high power distance and high masculinity, you know your place. You might not be told it, but you feel it and you navigate it according to where you stand in the hierarchy. So some things for me that occur even at the HVA are highly inhibitive, and some things have been prohibitive. But because I'm the foreigner and I live here, I have to make the concessions. But let's think about the shoe being on the other foot. What if you wanted to do business with me and it was important for you to better understand how I feel about certain things? It would be in everyone's best interest to understand what could be inhibitive or prohibitive. So speaking up in meetings, or speaking over the boss, for example, those could be things that happen and occur in a Dutch setting, but they might not ever happen in a setting in New Zealand. And you wouldn't know that until you've done your guided discovery and done the comparative analysis.
Yes. I want to notify you that you have 3 minutes left, so maybe you can wrap it up, and maybe some time for questions.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So the third is a project, and you're going to go out into a company and you're going to interview a person, international team as well as international clients, and you're going to translate everything you've learned in assignment 1 and 2 into your project in assignment 3. Assignment 4 is a reflection, and it basically covers assignment 1 and 2, and again it asks you to recycle a lot of the language from the course. So everything is a guided discovery. Walter and I are like metaphorically holding your hands the entire way. Lectures 1, 3, 5, and 7 are lectures, and then the even numbers are tutorials where we use that time to check your work, to give you space to ask lots of questions, and really get it right. Does anybody have any questions for me?